Well, it's good to talk with Jeff Hoffman, who's joined 83 Bar. And Jeff, welcome aboard. Tell us a little bit about your role at 83 Bar.
Yes, so I am the Vice President of Commercial Development and Strategic Partnerships. I will be focused on the CRO market, the contract research organizations, who essentially carry out the clinical trials on behalf of pharmaceutical, or as we know in our industry, sponsors. And
Very
so I'll
good.
be focused on helping them recruit patients into the trials that they get outsourced from pharmaceutical companies.
So in your experience, obviously it's deep in this area of clinical trials and recruitment and working with the clinical sites. What is it about patient recruitment that they would say is challenging? What issues, problems, and obstacles do you find that
Yeah,
CROs face in recruitment?
yeah. So there's actually a number of obstacles, and one of the challenges is the inclusion and exclusion requirements of any of the protocols. And finding these patients, there seems to be a fragmented market in terms of how we look at patient recruitment, meaning as patients are diagnosed with various ailments, it's not very easy for them to match to a clinical trial. And so if we can help accelerate that process of a patient being diagnosed, having an interest, becoming aware of leveraging clinical research as a care option, and then matching them via human touch, such as what we do at 83 Bar. I think that in itself is really a differentiator in the patient recruitment space.
Very good. And what you know about the 83 Bar, not just the services part and the how we walk through the patient journey, but the technology platform part. What would you see as patient recruitment plus in terms of the technology that 83 Bar brings?
Yeah, from what I've learned about the technology that we have at 83 Bar, is the ability to capture the patient's demographic information, as well as their some of their physical ailments, medical history, and then being able to sort of leverage the database and kind of rapidly identify where they could match in a clinical trial. So accelerating the potential cure for that ailment.
Hmm. And how would you contrast that, to say a lot of people do patient recruitment, but this technology platform provides a plus in that regard. How would you see that?
Yeah, in terms of the plus, what I see is there's actually a big difference between the patient recruitment companies that are currently our competitors, that are servicing pharmaceutical companies, and 83 Bar. And really the key differentiator I see is that human touch of having the qualified call center personnel, nurses, with medical knowledge, being able to, within minutes, touch base with the patient, and really with empathy, help guide them through the healthcare process,
Hmm.
in clinical research.
And it seems like, based on what you're describing, there's a technology that drives that, but there's a human empathy that overlaps that. Uh, how would you describe that combination of technology and human touch?
Yeah, so I think that the two obviously go together to form a accelerated process. So you have the technology and the human aspect. And from a patient perspective, I think it's really important that you not only fill out a form and submit to some database, and then with the hopes of being contacted in some shape or form, maybe even via email in the future about a potential clinical trial, but to actually have a human voice reach out, and show concern and be able to give somewhat support in terms of helping them get to the proper clinical research trial or potentially care option that wouldn't otherwise be available to them.
Hmm. And Jeff, obviously, based on your experience, you've seen a lot of communication companies, marketing companies, advertising companies, social media, publicity, so forth. Where does 83 Bar, from your experience, where would they stand in that stack, or what options or alternatives do you feel 83 Bar brings that these other ones don't have?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So I think because the so I think it said that less than 1% of all patients participate in a clinical research trial. So there is no one silver bullet in terms of patient recruitment. So there may be advertising marketing agencies that are particularly good at one aspect, and there may be other agencies that can find patients in another way. And then there's even healthcare and clinical research site networks that may have patients within their databases. But I think where we have an issue, and even in terms of diversity, right, trying to find patient populations that represent all ethnic areas. I think 83 Bar has, in the way they advertise, reaching out to different communities, an ability to bring that diversity of patient population, and also rural areas where folks may not be aware of using clinical trials as a potential care option.
And, when we think about accelerating this patient journey, you were describing, getting the patients to care faster. Why would that be so meaningful to the patient? We call them leads or candidates or trial participants and so forth. But first and foremost, they're people with healthcare issues. Why is this process so meaningful to them?
Yeah, so it's important to be fast and efficient in the treatment, I guess, process, because the faster we can identify the disease and provide treatment, the better the outcome in general. So I think it's in the patient's interest to have a better quality of life or prolonged life, the faster that we can get through that diagnosis and treatment for them.
Hmm. And then again, based on your experience working with the sites, what is the benefit to a clinical trial site of having these assessments and screenings and education process, ahead of time before they even get to the office?
It allows the physicians at the clinical sites to really focus on the care for the patient as opposed to running their own particular local marketing campaigns. The site can focus on what they do best, which is patient care. So when we refer patients to sites, we know that they meet some minimum criteria of disease, age, and other demographic areas, and so that they can screen the patient, provide informed consent, and then possibly randomize into a clinical trial.
Hmm. And you mentioned earlier about the inclusion exclusion criteria. It does raise the level, of difficulty sometimes, that we need to find these needle in a haystack type patients that meet a very specific set of criteria. Again, how is it relevant to the investigators and the site coordinators that 83 Bar is screening these people for those criteria?
Yes, so the inclusion exclusion criteria for protocols, it does make it very tricky, and it puts a lot of pressure on the site to get screened patients. So if we can take that burden off the physicians at the site and their personnel, it actually makes for a much more efficient process to be working at the site, and for the site to be much more successful in enrolling patients. And so from a site perspective, they want to be a high enrolling site, which is deemed to be very successful, and then in treatment of patients.
Great. Well, let's turn the page internally for a second and personally to you, Jeff. You recently joined 83 Bar in this role. What attracted you to the company?
So I am very passionate about providing patient care. So for me, I have a background in the clinical research industry for nearly 20 years, but my real passion is being closer to the patient. So what attracted me to 83 Bar is the fact that we have this great technology platform, this great human touch aspect in regards to a call center that reaches out to patients who are interested in participating in a clinical research trial and acting almost as a guide to navigate them to a trial that would fit their needs and fit their care. And so just for me, that was an important part of my next step in the career, is to be able to be closer to the patient.
Terrific. And, as 83 Bar continues to grow and attract more talent, let's say somebody might be watching our interview here, considering joining the company. What would you say to somebody thinking about joining 83 Bar?
Yeah, I would say to definitely do it. The people here are really quite refreshing to come from clinical research with scientists and kind of heavy regulated to kind of a much more refreshing environment. So where I think there's less bureaucracy, and you have the ability to really take on problems and solutions yourself without going through the numerous bureaucracy steps that a larger organization typically has.
And how have you found the sort of creative exchange and energy working with the rest of the team?
Yeah, and that's one of the benefits at 83 Bar is the high energy and really creativity of pretty much everyone that I've interacted with, and having the ability from upper management to really work on their own and to take problems head on, and to have that flexibility to do that is really encouraging.
Great. Well, why don't we just put a punctuation mark on our discussion here, Jeff, and go back to the central question. When we say patient recruitment plus, what is it about the technology and the platform that 83 Bars built that adds a plus to regular patient recruitment?
So at the end of the day, I feel it's really the human touch with the patient. So having the patient's demographic information contained within the database, but really the human touch aspect, the human compassion, to help navigate and guide the patient in a trusted manner to get them to a clinical trial that really meets their needs in terms of care and improving their quality of life.